Despite the fact that I was a kid growing up in the 80s, I'd never played the original Blaster Master. None of my friends owned the card, and I'd always thought the name was kinda dumb. In hindsight, I now know that it's a pretty great game that stands the test of time. I recommend you forget about it though. Seriously, don't play it unless you're incredibly interested in old games or don't own a 3DS or Switch, because the new release from Inti Creates, Blaster Master Zero, does an excellent job at recreating and adding onto the NES classic, making it palatable for a new audience. After countless wars and environmental destruction, our planet plunges into a long ice age that drives the human race underground for hundreds of years while the planet recovers. Meanwhile, a mysterious comet touches down on the surface of the planet, introducing foreign terrestrial organisms into the ecosystem. During a new habitability restoration process, genius engineer Jason Frudnick discovers a new creature, names it Fred, and decides to study it. Well, Fred somehow gets away. I mean, that's something a Fred would do, right? Anyway, he jumps into a random portal through which Jason follows to a dark space where he finds the microtank Sophia Mark III. Now, with a vehicle capable of killing alien mutants that walk the surface at his disposal and an eventual co-pilot to help him with the search, Jason travels through large sprawling areas in search of his frog-like, test subject? Although you can consider the story presented to be a simple modern take on that of the original 1988 NES title, it's actually an amalgamation of Blaster Master and Sho Wakusei Senki Meta Fight. Sophia 3 is still the localized name of Metal Attacker from that game instead of that of the planet. Eve, a canon immigrant from the Worlds of Power novelization of the very first game, is essentially Jennifer Gardner from Metafight, and the story of Metafight is actually implied to have already occurred, with the Blaster Master version being an on-Earth repeat of sorts. It's mostly written well, everything ties together nicely, and the Inti Creates method of exposition, you know, choosing to talk to your partner character as you play the game instead of leaving her mostly without a voice, that works because they're both stuck in a tank together. And that tank is quite beast, with a fast speed, insane vertical capability, and the ability to upgrade weapons with chips scattered throughout the original 8 areas. Jason moves about each area of the Metroidvania-style game world, killing mutants and discovering cave doors that lead to spaces where his tank can't travel. Here, the camera focal point is not only closer, but shot from a different perspective for a change in gameplay elements. Where Jason's blaster is weak against mutants in outside areas, the switched mechanics and size of enemies in the top-down dungeons allow for that same gun to have differing fire modes that truly showcase its destructive power. Yeah, not the low-level pea shooter. I mean the penetrative shot that moves through walls, the electric spark that damages all enemies on screen, the flamethrower, and at the apex, the incredibly ridiculous wave that not only stops enemies in their tracks like the standard shot, but moves through walls like the penetrator. It destroys almost everything in its wake, making the enemies less like roadblocks to progress and more like speed humps. That includes bosses. Oh, they look great, and there are more of them now compared to the original game, but in the face of the wave, they are pushovers. I can't even really make boss strategy videos with them. The only strategy here is use the wave, then take whatever weapon chip the boss drops and pull the same crap in the open areas with the tank. Up until Area 7, it's almost impossible to die from conflict with mutants, as they barely inflict damage and drop shield and sub-weapon refill containers like candy. The only reason why the last 3 maps are even remotely difficult is because of a combination of an increase in enemy numbers, certain mutants having higher health to enforce a stealth mechanic, and the inventive area design. Otherwise, regardless of area, everything is a bit too easy, especially compared to the original game. This is what happens when you take an older game like this and increase the options available to the player without tweaking the difficulty for balance, and this includes nullifying the penalty for taking damage with an energy shield. Honestly, for a game made by Inti Creates, the ease with which you can blow through this game is shocking. Just don't blow through it too quickly, because access to the best ending requires beating and getting everything. Despite its status as a remake or reimagining, Blaster Master Zero shares a great deal with the original game in terms of presentation, while still clearly being something that can't be replicated on the NES. A limited color palette, the sprite work, and the tiling are practically copies of the original, but many background elements wouldn't have been possible due to hardware limitations back then, including these effects and, yep, the music does the same thing, being a very good recreation of the original chiptune soundtrack with mixing that's a bit different. For example, the noise channel is now replaced with more complex percussion, and the instrument pitch is sometimes higher. The top-down sections also include new tracks that are area-specific. The OST is just plain good, and some of the tracks are now on my rotating playlist. The character and story art is also good, maintaining the limited color palette and black outlines used elsewhere throughout the game. Overall, I was never confused or irritated by the art and sound, so I actually have nothing really negative negative to say here. Seriously, the worst thing I can say about Blaster Master Zero is that it's just too easy, which, depending on your views on difficulty, could be a deal breaker. But that would be the only reason to question spending $10 on what is otherwise a stellar addition to the 3DS and Switch libraries. The story is a great merging of two original narratives to further cement the Western canon as the dominant tale. The art and sound are outstanding reproductions of the original work with their own modern flair, and the controls and gameplay are just solid. Whether it's for the old audience or a new one, this version of the first Blaster just might be the new master.